right, let's get into lesson 2, adding rational numbers. So same rules apply as when we were adding integers. Now, instead of us adding whole numbers, instead of us adding whole positive and negative numbers, we're going to be adding positive and negative fractions and decimals. So our same rules apply. We want to think of SADs. Remember, if they have the same signs, we're going to add. And if they have different signs, we're going to subtract. So take a second. I have this filled in already. Fill that in. Same, we add. Different, we subtract. And we're talking about the signs. Same signs, we add. Different signs, we subtract. So if you need to make a note of that, same, we're talking about signs or different signs. Okay. Let's just refresh real quick. How do we add and subtract fractions in general? Some review. You did this last year in 6th grade. Reminder, they must have a common denominator. So if we're trying to add or subtract fractions, they must have a common denominator. Remember, denominator is the bottom number of your fraction. Now, if we're trying to add or subtract with decimals, we have to line up those decimal points. Okay, whether we're adding, subtracting them. So quick review. All right, all we're going to do here to kind of learn and practice this is we're just going to do a bunch of examples together. And I'm going to have you maybe pause and do some on your own and then come back in to check in. So let's look at number 1 here. First example, we have -7/8 plus 1/4. So we're adding rational numbers. First, we were always thinking of our rule SADs. Do these have the same signs or do these have different signs? I see a negative and I see a positive, so I see different signs, which means we're going to do subtraction. Remember, different, we subtract. So in order to subtract these fractions, they have to have a common denominator. I have -7/8. I can keep that one because I'm going to keep the 8. Plus, now let's change 1/4 to have 8 as its denominator. What do I multiply by 4 to get 8? I'm going to multiply it by 2. Remember, whatever you do to the bottom, you have to then do to the top. So what's 1 times 2? 2. So 1/4 with an 8 as the denominator would be 2/8. Remember, we said they have different signs, so we're going to subtract these numbers. What is 7/8 minus 2/8? When we're subtracting, we keep the common denominator and just subtract your numerators. What's 7 minus 2? Now, we have to keep the sign of the greater number. 7/8 is greater than 2/8, so our answer is going to be -5/8. So let's write that. Awesome. Let's move to the right. There is number 2. We have decimals now. Do these have the same signs or different signs? I see different signs again. So different signs meaning we're going to subtract these. When we're subtracting decimals, remember we have to line up that decimal point. So we're going to line up our decimals and subtract them because they're different signs. Here's the important thing, guys. When you're lining up decimals, we always put the larger number on top. So even though this number comes second, it's larger. So when I stack them, it needs to be on the top. We're lining up our decimal points. And then let's subtract these numbers for us. I need to borrow. What is 13 minus 5? Get you thinking for a second. Hopefully you got 8. Bring your decimal point straight down. 4 minus 2 gives us 2. Last thing we want to do is make sure we decide whether it's a positive or a negative answer. Our larger number was on top. I already started. We're taking the sign of the larger, so that means our answer should be positive. So it's positive 2 8/10. Let's continue on. Let's look at number 3. Number 3, I see fractions again, but this time I see some mixed numbers. Now, when you have mixed numbers, I would make them improper. So I see 20 over 3 already is written as improper, so I'm going to change 6 1/3 to be improper as well. Reminder on how to make it improper. You multiply, kind of moving in a circle here. We multiply 6 and 3, and then we'll add our numerator to that. So 6 times 3 gives me 18. 18 plus 1 gives me 19. And then I keep it over my original denominator. This was negative, so it's going to stay negative. And then let's just bring this down. Now, what do I notice? I notice they're both improper now, which is good. I also notice they already have the same denominator. So whether we're adding or subtracting, we're ready to go with fractions because they both have a 3. So now we're just deciding, do these have the same signs or different? I see a negative and a positive, so they're different. So again, different signs we're gonna subtract. So let's subtract these. What is 20 minus 19? Should be a 1, and we keep our denominator. And now we just have to decide, is it positive or negative? We're always taking the sign of the larger number. 20 over 3 is larger than 19 over 3. It's positive, so our answer should be positive 1/3. All right. What I want you to try is number 4. Decide, do they have the same signs or different? So should you be adding or subtracting them? And then go ahead and try to add or subtract those decimals together. Give me a final answer, check your sign. So go ahead and pause the video when you're done and ready to check an answer. Press play again and we'll walk through it. All right, welcome back. So you should have decided that they have the same signs, so you should be adding them together. Same signs, add. It's our first part of our acronym. So if I'm going to add these together, when you add them, it doesn't matter if your bigger or smaller is on top. All that matters is that you are lining up your decimal point. Now, I would just get in the habit of, putting your larger one on top. Doesn't make a difference, though, when we're adding them. As a placeholder, this 5 doesn't have anything under it. I can add a 0 there. So now we're just adding. Hopefully, when you added, you got 12 and 45 hundredths. Last thing to decide is whether or not your answer is positive or negative. Hopefully you're remembering our rules. If they have the same signs, we add them, but then we keep that same sign. So our answer should be negative 12 and 45 hundredths. Give yourself a nice little pat on the back. Oh my goodness, I jumped pages. Give yourself a nice little pat on the back if you got that correct. Oh goodness, what is happening? Having some technical issues here. Here we go, found it. Phew. All right, give yourself a nice little pat on the back if you got that correct. If you did not, let's fix that and hopefully learn from our mistake. If you would like to, you can pause the video and try 5 and 6 and then come back and check in as I go over the answers. If you want me to walk through it, you can just keep playing along the video and following and filling in your notes with me. I'm going to go through how to do 5 and 6 with you now. Number 5, I see a fraction and I see a whole number. Remember, I can rewrite a whole number as a fraction by putting it over 1. I now notice, or want to ask myself, do these have the same signs or different? So am I adding or subtracting? I see they're both negative, so they have the same signs, which means I'm going to add them. So when I try to add these together in order to add fractions, what do they have to have? Hopefully you're thinking a common denominator, and you're right. Right now, my first fraction here has a denominator of 1. My second one has a denominator of 2. What can their common denominator be? I'm going to make it 2. Could you make it 4? Sure. There's plenty of options. I always just try to think of the easiest one. If you're unsure and can't think of one, remember you can always just multiply the denominators together. 2 times 1 is 2. So I'm going to change this to a denominator. Right now it's 2 over 1. I want it to have a denominator of 2, which means I need to multiply by 2, which means I need to do that to the top. 2 times 2 gives me 4. So I now have negative 4 over 2 plus, and this can stay the same because it's already 2, right? Less work if we keep that at 2. They had the same sign, so let's add these together. 4 plus 7 gives me 11 over, and you keep your denominator 2. Same signs, keep that sign. Now my only thing with leaving it like that is that this is an improper fraction. I want to simplify it. So let's make it into a mixed number. How many times can 2 go into 11? Hopefully you're thinking 5. That would get me to 10, which means I have 1 left over, and you keep your denominator. So negative 5.5 is our final answer here. Let's look over at number 6. I'm noticing they have different signs, so I'm going to subtract these numbers. In order to subtract them, you stack the larger number over the smaller number, lining up your decimals. Remember, if there's numbers that don't line up with any other numbers, we fill in a 0 there. And now we're subtracting. I need to borrow. Just do your subtraction. Borrow again. Hopefully, let's bring down your decimal. Borrow again. Hopefully you got 6 point, that's a decimal there, 87. And then double check yourself. Should my answer be positive or should it be negative? Take a look at that. You take the sign of the larger number. This was our larger, was the one on top. It was positive, so I know my answer should be a positive 6 87/100. Awesome job if you got both of those correct and tried those on your own. Hopefully if you didn't try those on your own, you feel a little bit better with me walking through it and you're ready to tackle some on your own. So the same rules we applied as our first chapter when we were adding integers. We're still thinking of SADS, except now we're taking it a little bit further and we're adding and subtracting our fractions and decimals, which makes it a bit harder. Hopefully you're going to ask any questions